The desert sun beat down with an unrelenting heat, turning the arid land into a furnace. Dust whipped into the air in swirling eddies, and the distant mountains shimmered in the haze. She staggered forward, her feet blistered and bleeding, the coarse sand cutting into her soles with every step. Her chest heaved, lungs screaming for air, but the nearest town, if one even existed out here, was miles away. She had run for days, fleeing betrayal, shame, and a life that had betrayed her at every turn. And now, alone, exhausted and trembling, she realized she might not survive the night. Her vision blurred as she fell to her knees, the coarse sand scraping her palms. She tried to cry out for help, but her throat was dry, cracked, and raw. The river she had been following on instinct appeared finally as a thin, shimmering line in the distance. Gathering the last of her strength, she crawled toward it, her fingers trembling as they brushed the water's edge. She leaned over, desperate, and drank greedily, splashing cool relief over her face, but her relief was short-lived. A shadow loomed over her. Startled, she jerked upright and saw him, an Apache warrior standing tall, his presence commanding yet calm. His dark eyes held an intensity that seemed to pierce right through her, and yet they were not unkind. He was silent, his movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. A strong jaw, high cheekbones, and long dark hair pulled back marked him as a man of strength and purpose. She wanted to run, but her body refused. She was too weak, too tired, and somewhere deep in her mind, a strange pull anchored her to the spot. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said finally, his voice low, resonant and hypnotic, carrying both warning and care. It was not a voice meant to threaten, but one that demanded attention. She hesitated, uncertainty gripping her. I can manage," she whispered, ashamed of her vulnerability. But the truth was obvious even to her. She could not. The warrior crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level without breaking eye contact. He extended a hand, calloused yet gentle. "Come with me," he urged. The invitation was simple, but she felt the weight behind it, a promise of safety, of shelter, perhaps of something more. Her pride screamed at her to refuse, yet every instinct screamed to accept. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his, and for the first time in days she felt steady. He led her through a narrow path between jagged rocks, moving silently, every step precise. She followed, her senses alert to every sound, every shift of the wind. Finally, they reached a small encampment, modest yet alive with the warmth of firelight. Smoke curled upward from a central fire, carrying the scent of roasted meat and herbs. Children laughed quietly, elders spoke softly, and the sounds of life, the very thing she had been running from, enveloped her. The warrior offered her water, then food, and she hesitated, unsure whether to trust the gesture. But his eyes, unwavering and honest, told her this was no trap. As she ate, she noticed the way he watched over his people, not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a protector, fierce and patient, commanding respect without a word. He did not rush her, did not question her presence. He simply existed as a pillar of strength and safety, and for the first time in months, she felt the icy knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. That night, as the desert cooled under a blanket of stars, he sat beside her, close but not imposing. He leaned in, his voice a whisper, intimate and electrifying. "You will open yourself to me again and again. Until my son grows in your womb," he said. The words shocked her, stirring a storm of fear, longing, and something unnameable within her. She recoiled inwardly, uncertain, yet she could not ignore the way her body and mind responded to him, to the promise, to the possibility of a future she had never dared imagine. For the first time, she realized that her journey was far from over. Not just the journey across the desert, but the journey of herself, of trust and of desire. And in the quiet of the desert night, beneath a sky that stretched endlessly above them, the seeds of a story, raw, dangerous, and irresistible, were sown. The firelight flickered across the warrior's face, casting shadows that made his features seem both fierce and tender at once. She sat a careful distance away, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around them as if holding herself together would somehow keep the world at bay. Her mind raced with questions. Who was he really? Why had he saved her? And most pressing of all, what did he mean by the words he had whispered just hours before under the stars? He did not rush her. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of the desert wind. He studied her, not with judgment but with something far deeper, a patience that both unnerved and intrigued her. Finally he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "You fear what I said," he observed, his dark eyes catching the firelight, glinting with unspoken emotion. Her voice faltered. She had spent so long running from men, from trust, from intimacy. To hear such a declaration from a stranger, no matter how captivating, left her reeling. I don't know you, she admitted, her words a fragile shield. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected as much. No, you do not, and I do not ask you to understand everything tonight. But you must understand this: I have seen you, truly seen you in ways others never could or would. His gaze held her, unwavering, and for the first time she felt like she mattered, not for her beauty, or her usefulness, or her compliance, but for her very self. He rose, moving closer, yet carefully respecting the space between them. I know you have been hurt, he said, voice softening. I know the world has taken more from you than it should. But here with me you may find something you have not known in years: safety, respect, and desire that honors you. Her chest tightened at the word. Desire. It was a foreign concept, something she had buried under layers of fear and pain. Could it be possible that a man, not just any man, but this fierce Apache warrior, could awaken such feelings in her again? Then he knelt, placing his hand near hers, palm down on the sand, not touching her, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. I do not seek to possess you, he whispered. I seek only to share with you, to teach you, to care for you, and yes, to love you. If you allow it. If you choose it. The word stirred something inside her, a trembling, dangerous hope. She wanted to believe him, desperately. Yet the walls she had built over years of hurt rose instinctively. And the son? She asked quietly, almost afraid to speak it aloud. What do you mean? He held her gaze steadily. My son, he said, voice rich with conviction. I will not live forever, and the bloodline of my people, my tribe, my family, it is sacred. I see in you a strength and spirit that could carry him forward, that could carry us forward. I am asking for more than your trust. I am asking for your heart, your courage, your body, and your willingness to share life with me, to bear my child and to grow with him. The weight of his words hit her like a wave, crashing against the fragile defenses she had spent years constructing. Her mind screamed caution, fear, and the echo of past betrayals. Yet another part of her, a part long buried under hurt, quivered with longing, wonder, and an undeniable pull toward him. She studied him, searching his eyes for deceit, for manipulation, for any hint of malice. She found none. Only honesty, only strength, only the promise of a life that could be fiercely protective, deeply passionate, and infinitely more real than anything she had known before. The fire crackled between them, its warmth wrapping around them like a silent witness to the unspoken understanding forming. She realized with a shiver she could not suppress that this was a choice she might make, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of a raw, uncontainable desire to live, to feel, and to surrender to something that promised both danger and delight. For the first time since she had begun her flight, the idea of stopping, of staying, of opening herself, did not fill her with terror. It filled her with a tentative, thrilling possibility. And in that moment, under the vast expanse of stars and the watchful gaze of a man unlike any she had ever known, she understood that her life, her very self, was about to change forever. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. She remained cautious, keeping her distance while observing the warrior and the life of the camp. Children played near the fire, elders moved with deliberate ease, and the camp was alive with the rhythm of survival. She watched him move among his people with a calm authority, yet his gaze often found hers, steady, patient, and unintrusive. There was a power in him that demanded respect without force, and a gentleness that made her wary and intrigued at the same time. Each gesture he made seemed deliberate yet effortless. He brought water when she was too exhausted to walk to the stream. He built the fire without a word, and he always ensured her food was within reach. Small acts, yet they carried a weight that unsettled her. Trust was not something she had given lightly, and these gestures slowly began to erode the walls she had built. She tested him as much as she tested herself. One morning, she walked near the edge of the canyon alone, pretending to gather herbs, hoping to see if he would intervene if danger approached. She did not admit it even to herself, but a part of her wanted him to watch over her, to care for her without being asked. And he did, Not intrusively, not with arrogance, but with the quiet, unspoken promise that he would act if harm came near. Her hesitation was not just fear, it was history. Men had betrayed her before, used her body as a weapon or a distraction, and left scars that ran deeper than the eye could see. But this warrior, there was something different about him. Something unyielding yet respectful. He seemed to see her, not just her body, but the fractures in her spirit and the guarded corners of her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky burned with shades of amber and crimson, he sat near her again. This time he did not speak immediately. He simply watched the fire, his silhouette framed by the fading light. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was charged, alive with tension and possibility. Finally he spoke, his voice low and careful. "You are afraid," he said, stating what she had tried to hide even from herself. "I am," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to trust anymore." He nodded, as if he understood perfectly. "Trust is not given lightly, and it should not be," he said. "You have lived through pain, through betrayal. I do not expect you to surrender your heart or your body all at once. But know this, you are safe here. With me you will not be forced, and you will not be deceived. Not now, not ever." The honesty in his words, the conviction behind them, stirred something deep inside her. She wanted to believe him, but every fiber of her being resisted. She feared giving herself over too soon, feared the possibility of losing control once again, and yet the more time she spent in his presence, the more the idea of fear began to intertwine with desire. Desire not just for him, but for the life he offered, one of strength, protection, and undeniable passion. Days turned into nights, and the tension between them grew. He would sit nearby while she worked, offering help only when necessary, respecting her space while remaining a constant, silent protector. His patience was maddening. He never pressed, never demanded, yet every glance, every subtle gesture, communicated a yearning as raw as her own buried desire. One night, as she lay beneath a canopy of stars, she felt the loneliness she had carried for so long begin to loosen. She realized that her hesitation was slowly giving way to curiosity, to longing, to the dangerous thrill of imagining what it would be like to surrender herself to him. But fear remained, whispering warnings she could not silence, and she knew that the journey toward trust, toward opening herself again, would not be easy. And so she remained on the precipice, caught between instinct and desire, between fear and the undeniable pull of the warrior's presence. Every act of care, every word of patience, every quiet glance chipped away at her walls. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to feel that she might survive opening herself, not only to him, but to the possibility of love, of intimacy, of life renewed. The seed had been planted. The desert night held its breath, and she knew that soon, very soon, she would be forced to confront the deepest parts of herself, her fears, her desires, and the promise the warrior had whispered, that she would open herself to him, again and again until his son grew in her womb. The evening descended quietly, the desert air cooling under a vast, star-studded sky. The camp had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Children slept near the fire. Elders murmured softly, and the world outside seemed miles away. She felt the weight of the day pressing on her, tension, fear, curiosity, and a longing she could no longer deny. Her heart pounded as he approached, his presence deliberate, silent, and impossibly commanding. He stopped a few feet away, his dark eyes catching hers in the flickering firelight. There was no rush, no pressure, only the undeniable pull of a man who had already begun to claim pieces of her heart without a single word. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. She started, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain the storm inside her? He took a single step closer, then another, closing the distance but leaving space enough for her to retreat if she wished. "You do not need to speak," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate deep in her chest. "I only need you to feel," and feel she did. Every inch of her senses was alive. The warmth of his presence, the faint scent of earth and smoke that clung to him, the intensity of his gaze. Her body, so long accustomed to fear and distrust, responded despite her mind's frantic protests. Desire stirred within her, frightening and electric, igniting a fire she had thought long extinguished. He extended his hand, not commanding but inviting, and she hesitated only a moment before placing hers in his. His fingers were strong, calloused yet gentle, wrapping around hers with a pressure that was firm but not suffocating. The simple touch sent a shiver through her body, and she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen. "You are ready," he whispered. And it was not a question but a statement, a truth that both startled and thrilled her. She could not deny the truth in his words. She wanted this closeness, this connection. But fear still lingered, whispering caution. He seemed to sense it, his thumb brushing softly over her knuckles, grounding her, offering comfort. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself beside her. There was no haste, no suddenness, only the slow, careful intimacy of two souls beginning to touch. He traced a line of warmth along her arm, his fingers grazing her skin in ways that spoke of tenderness and reverence. Every movement was deliberate, teaching her that intimacy could be a language of respect as well as desire. Her breath caught as he leaned closer, lips barely brushing her ear. "Trust me," he murmured. The words were both command and plea, and she felt herself yielding inch by inch to the pull between them. Her body softened, her muscles relaxed, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel, not just with her mind, but with her entire being. The night unfolded slowly, a dance of exploration and discovery. He learned the curves and lines of her body as if mapping a sacred terrain, each touch a silent promise of care and respect. She learned to let go, to respond without fear, to trust in his strength and gentleness. Moans of pleasure mingled with whispered reassurances, creating a symphony of intimacy that transcended words. Hours seemed to blur. Every touch, every kiss, every tender movement wove a tapestry of connection that went far beyond the physical. She felt herself opening, not only to him but to life, to desire, to the possibility of love she had long thought impossible. And he, in turn, met her hesitations with patience, her fears with warmth, her longing with reverent attention. When the first light of dawn crept across the desert, she lay beside him, her body and heart intertwined with his. Exhaustion mingled with fulfillment. Fear had softened into trust, and desire had blossomed into a fragile, breathtaking bond. In the quiet aftermath, she realized that this night had changed her, had begun to peel away the layers of fear and pain, leaving her open to the promise he had whispered, that she would open herself to him again, and again until his son grew within her. As she drifted into a tentative sleep, she understood that the journey had only begun. The desert outside remained vast and untamed, but inside the quiet of the camp a new fire burned, one of connection, trust, and the undeniable pull of a future neither of them could yet fully imagine. The days that followed the night they had shared were different from any she had known. The desert sun no longer felt like an oppressive force but a quiet witness to her transformation. She moved through the camp with a new awareness, feeling the lingering warmth of his touch and the echo of his whispered words as if they had imprinted themselves on her very soul. Desire, once a forbidden and frightening thing, began to surface in ways she could no longer ignore. He did not rush her, did not demand anything. Instead, he moved through her world like a shadow she could sense but not fully see, a constant presence that both excited and unsettled her. When he approached, it was with measured steps, a hand extended, a brush of fingers that made her pulse race. She noticed the way he watched her with something deeper than curiosity or longing, a respect that made her own desire feel sacred, not shameful. At first, she tried to resist, to maintain the fragile wall she had built around herself. She reminded herself of the past betrayals, of the men who had used her, discarded her, or betrayed her trust. Yet every time she attempted to pull away, his patience drew her back. He seemed to understand her hesitation, her fear, and met it not with force but with a steady, unwavering presence that demanded nothing, yet offered everything. Their encounters were no longer just physical. They were moments of discovery, of intimacy that went beyond mere pleasure. He learned the subtle shifts of her moods, the quiet signals of longing she tried to hide even from herself. He mirrored her hesitation with gentle touches, whispered reassurances, and the occasional teasing glance that made her heart flutter against her ribs. Desire, she realized, could exist alongside trust, and passion could bloom without fear. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the desert in molten gold, he found her alone near the river. She had been avoiding him, wanting space, yet longing for him at the same time. He knelt beside her, his eyes meeting hers with a calm intensity that made her chest tighten. "Do you still resist?" he asked softly, his voice almost a caress. I don't know, she admitted, her hands twisting in her lap. The truth was frightening. She wanted him desperately. But opening herself fully still terrified her. I've been hurt, she whispered. He placed a hand over hers, warm and grounding. I know, he said simply. And I will not hurt you, I cannot. Not ever. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty, a promise sealed in the depth of his gaze. In that moment she felt something break, a tiny, trembling fragment of the walls she had built. The next moments unfolded slowly, deliberately, as though the desert itself had slowed time to witness them. His hands traced the contours of her arms, her shoulders, moving with reverence and precision. Every touch, every whisper, every shared breath pulled her closer to a truth she had long denied. She wanted this. She needed this, and she could trust herself to feel it fully. She surrendered, not in fear, but in a mixture of curiosity, longing, and newfound courage. Each encounter became a lesson in letting go, in allowing herself to be consumed by desire without losing herself in it. Her body responded to him, to the heat of his skin and the strength of his hands in ways she had thought impossible. And with each touch, each kiss, each intimate caress, her trust deepened, intertwining with the desire she had once thought forbidden. By the time night fell, she understood that she had crossed a threshold. Desire was no longer something to fear. It was a language, a bridge between their souls, a bond that made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined. She looked at him with eyes wide and vulnerable, yet filled with something fierce and undeniable. And when he whispered her name, the low, husky sound vibrating through her very being, she finally allowed herself to believe in what she had once feared. That desire could be a path to trust, that intimacy could be sacred, and that love, raw, consuming, and transformative, was finally within her reach. The desert dawn was soft, a pale glow brushing the horizon, but her mind was anything but calm. She had grown accustomed to the warrior's presence, his protective patience, and the way he awakened desires she had long buried. Yet a new weight pressed on her heart, the memory of his whispered words about his son, a promise that had seemed abstract before but now loomed with quiet inevitability. He approached her as she sat near the river, her fingers tracing idle patterns in the sand. The sun caught his dark hair, haloing him with warmth, and for a moment she felt the pull of fear and longing twist within her. He knelt beside her without speaking at first, letting the silence stretch like a taut wire between them. Then finally he spoke, his voice low, steady, and unyielding. Do you remember what I told you? She looked up, startled by the intensity in his gaze. About your son? She whispered, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. She had thought of it in fleeting moments, a whisper of possibility, but never had she allowed herself to consider what it might truly mean. He nodded, his hand brushing hers in a gesture both comforting and electrifying. Yes, my son. I have carried the weight of my people, the knowledge of my lineage, and the hope for the future. You have the strength I see in few. I believe you can help carry this future, not just for him but for us, for life beyond this moment. The words struck her with a mixture of awe and fear. The idea of motherhood, of bearing his child, was overwhelming. She had spent so long guarding herself, so long running from responsibilities, from intimacy, from love, that the thought of carrying life within her seemed almost impossible. And yet, there was something undeniable in the promise he offered, a life intertwined with his, a bond forged through trust, desire, and the potential for creation. Why me? She asked quietly, her voice trembling. Why would you ask this of me? He studied her, his gaze unwavering. Because I see in you what others overlook. You are strong. You are resilient. You are not defined by your past or by fear. You have the courage to open yourself not only to me but to life itself. That is why. Her breath caught. His words were not empty flattery. They were a recognition of her soul, a truth she had never allowed herself to embrace. And in that recognition, a spark of longing and possibility flared, a longing for the life he described, a life where she was not merely surviving but thriving, loved, and honored. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, the wind still, the ripples of the river quiet. She reached out tentatively, letting her fingers brush against his. The contact was electric, grounding her in the present while opening doors she had long kept closed. And if I fail? She asked, her voice barely audible. "You will not fail," he said simply. "We will do this together, not as master and servant, not as stranger and companion, but as partners. You will carry my son, yes, but you will also carry our trust, our love, and the strength of both our spirits. You will not be alone." The weight of his words pressed upon her, yet it was not suffocating. It was a challenge, a promise, a future calling her forward. She realized that this was more than desire, more than intimacy. It was creation, protection, and legacy entwined. And in the warmth of his gaze, she felt a stirring of courage, of willingness, of a readiness she had never believed possible. Her heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. To carry his child would be to embrace life fully, to surrender herself in a way that was both terrifying and liberating. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing them in light, she felt the first true spark of certainty in months. She could trust him, she could desire him, and she could open herself to the promise of life they would create together. In that moment, the whisper of his earlier words returned to her mind. "You will open yourself to me again and again, until my son grows in your womb." It was no longer a threat, no longer a distant fantasy. It was a truth she was beginning to accept, and a promise she was ready to live. The desert had always felt isolated, a world apart from the chaos of towns and men who would use her for their gain. Yet even here, whispers of danger found her. One morning, while she gathered firewood near the outskirts of the camp, she spotted movement in the distant hills, dust rising in small clouds, the unmistakable sign of riders approaching. Her pulse quickened and a cold wave of fear washed over her. She had hoped that in the desert, she could finally be free. The Apache noticed her tension immediately, his sharp gaze sweeping the horizon before settling on her. Without a word, he moved beside her, his presence a solid reassurance. "Riders," he said, voice low but commanding. "They are looking for you." Her stomach dropped. Her past had followed her relentlessly, but she had convinced herself she could escape it here, at least for a while. Now, confronted with the reality of danger, the fragile sense of safety she had begun to trust seemed to unravel. "Why would they come here?" she whispered, fear and disbelief intertwining in her voice. "They seek to use you, to punish, or to profit from what they think they can control," he explained, his dark eyes narrowing. "They do not know me. They do not know my people. But they will learn, soon enough." Without hesitation, he led her back to the camp, moving with the precision of a man who had faced danger countless times before. She followed, heart racing, muscles tense, but a strange sense of calm settled over her as long as he was near. He knew the land, the terrain, and the weaknesses of anyone who dared approach their sanctuary. She began to realize, with a mixture of awe and relief, just how much of her safety rested in his hands, and how willingly she had begun to trust him. As the riders drew closer, the Apache rallied his people with quiet authority. They moved like shadows, blending with the desert landscape, prepared to defend their home and the woman who had become part of their lives. Every movement was calculated, silent, yet deliberate. She watched, a mix of fear and fascination gripping her, as he became the leader, protector, and unwavering force of strength she had never imagined. The riders arrived just as the sun dipped low, their intentions obvious and threatening. They called her name, shouted threats, and demanded her surrender. She felt the old panic rise, but before she could act, he was at her side, positioning himself like a barrier between her and the intruders. His eyes burned with intensity, voice low and dangerous. "She is not yours," he said, each word carrying the weight of steel. "Leave now, or face consequences you cannot imagine." The confrontation was swift and decisive. His people, trained and united, moved with precision to block the intruder's path. The riders underestimated the warrior and his tribe, and the fight ended quickly, decisively, with the threat neutralized. She had watched in tense silence, heart pounding, but never had she felt safer. The danger had arrived, yet he had protected her without hesitation, without compromise. When the last dust cloud faded into the horizon, she found herself trembling, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment and the realization of what she had witnessed. He turned to her, his expression softening, and reached for her hand. "You see?" he said, voice steady and certain. "I will not let anyone harm you. Not now. Not ever." She clutched his hand, feeling the strength and warmth of his grip, and a deep, unshakable trust settled over her. The desert, once a place of isolation and fear, now felt like a sanctuary, not because of its emptiness, but because he was there. Every act of protection, every moment of care, every unwavering glance reinforced what she had begun to understand. She could surrender herself to him, trust him fully, and let desire and life grow without fear. As the camp returned to quiet, the bond between them deepened in a way that words could not capture. Danger had tested them, but it had also proven the truth of his promise. She was safe, desired, and valued, and in that moment she knew with certainty that the path ahead, no matter how fraught with uncertainty, was one she could walk alongside him, with trust, passion, and the promise of a life that was theirs to claim. The desert nights had grown familiar, and with them, a rhythm between them settled, a rhythm that went beyond survival, beyond desire, into something far deeper. Each evening, as the camp quieted and the stars stretched endlessly above, they would sit together in silence, their presence speaking volumes where words were unnecessary. It was during these quiet hours that she began to see him fully, not just as a warrior, protector, or lover, but as a man shaped by loss, responsibility, and unwavering honor. One night, as a cool breeze rustled the desert grass, she finally asked what had long lingered in her mind. "Tell me about your past," she said softly, her voice carrying more curiosity than command. His eyes darkened, a shadow passing over his usually unreadable features. He exhaled slowly, as if measuring the weight of what he was about to share. "I lost much," he began, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "My parents, my first kin, and those I loved. I carried the responsibility of my people at a young age. Every choice I made, every path I walked was for the survival and honor of my tribe. Love, intimacy, it was a luxury I could not afford." His eyes found hers, intense and unwavering. "Until you," her chest tightened. His words were not boastful, nor were they flattery. They were raw, honest, and intimate. She realized that this man, who had awakened in her feelings she thought long dead, had lived a life of restraint, sacrifice, and unspoken longing, and now he offered a part of himself to her fully, without hesitation, without shame. The trust she had been building over weeks, the careful observations, the shared moments, the acts of protection, found fertile ground in this confession. She felt honored, vulnerable, and deeply connected all at once. Slowly, she shared fragments of her own past, her voice trembling with memory and emotion. She told him of betrayal, of heartbreak, of nights spent alone with fear and regret. And with every word, she saw the way he listened, not as a man judging her, but as a soul understanding another soul. Days turned into nights filled with shared stories, laughter, and occasional tears. She saw the tenderness in his eyes when he spoke of his son, the reverence in his voice when he described the land and his people, and the patience in his touch when he guided her hands through the rituals and daily tasks of the camp. She began to realize that intimacy was not solely physical. It was a weaving of hearts and minds, of trust earned and honored, of souls daring to meet one another. Their physical closeness became a reflection of this growing bond. Touches were gentler, kisses deeper, and moments of passion carried with them a sense of reverence and trust she had never experienced before. Her body responded not only to desire but to a profound sense of safety and belonging. With him, she discovered that opening herself fully was not an act of submission. It was an act of courage, of love, and of partnership. One evening, after a long day of tending to the camp and the children, she found herself leaning against him as the fire burned low. "I never thought I could feel like this again," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "Alive, wanted, safe." He tightened his arm around her, pressing her close without constraining her, his lips brushing her hair. "You deserve it," he said simply. "You deserve to feel love, to feel safe, to feel desire without fear. And I will not let anything take that from you, not now, not ever." In that moment, she realized how far they had come. From strangers to allies, from fear to desire, from walls built of pain to a bond of trust and intimacy. Their emotional connection had deepened the physical one, making every touch, every whisper, every glance heavier with meaning and promise. She understood now that love was not merely about passion. It was about understanding, honoring and choosing one another repeatedly, day after day. As the desert night stretched on, she closed her eyes against his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat echo her own. Here in the quiet of the wilderness, she had found not only protection and desire, but the promise of a shared life. a life in which fear had no place, only trust, intimacy, and the unspoken vow that whatever came, they would face it together. The first signs were subtle, a morning nausea she could not ignore, a weariness that seemed to settle deep in her bones. At first she tried to dismiss it, blaming the desert heat, the hard work of the camp, or her own nerves. But the warrior noticed immediately. His gaze, sharp and knowing, softened as he studied her, a quiet question in his eyes. "You feel different," he said one evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills. His voice carried concern, curiosity, and an unspoken awe. "Tell me the truth." She hesitated, fear flaring in her chest. She had carried so much alone for so long, pain, betrayal, shame. Could she carry life now? Could she bear his child as he had whispered she would and still remain herself? But in his unwavering gaze she saw no pressure, only support and trust. With a trembling breath she nodded. I am with child." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and promise. A moment of silence followed, filled only by the whisper of the desert wind and the crackle of the fire. Then he took her hands in his, holding them gently but firmly. "Then it is true," he said, a low rumble of emotion beneath his calm exterior. "Our child, our future. You will not carry this alone." The realization shifted something inside her. Fear mingled with awe, anxiety with longing. She was not simply carrying a child. She was carrying the embodiment of trust, love, and a bond forged in the harshest of deserts. She felt her body change, her senses sharpen, and her mind expand to embrace a responsibility she had never dared to imagine. He became her constant companion, not just in moments of physical intimacy, but in every act of care. He watched her diet, guided her through gentle exercises, and ensured she rested when she needed it. His attention was patient, unwavering, and filled with reverence, as if each glance, each touch, each whispered word honored the new life she carried. She began to feel powerful, needed, and cherished in ways she had never thought possible. With the passage of weeks, she noticed subtle transformations, not only in her body, but in her mind and spirit. The fear that had haunted her for so long softened, replaced by a fierce determination to protect this new life and embrace the bond that had created it. She began to see herself not merely as a survivor, but as a mother, a lover, and a partner, her identity expanding in tandem with the child she carried. Their intimacy changed too. Physical connection became deeper, more tender, more sacred. Every touch was careful yet passionate, every kiss a promise, every whispered word a vow. She learned to trust herself to give and receive pleasure without fear, knowing that he honored her body as he honored her soul. Desire and devotion intertwined, creating a tapestry of connection that strengthened with every passing day. One evening, as she rested against him under the stars, she allowed herself to speak the thought that had been growing within her. "I feel different," she admitted, her voice soft, filled with wonder. "Stronger, alive, connected, in ways I never imagined." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering. "That is life," he said simply. "It is not just the child growing within you. It is you, your heart, your body, your spirit, embracing what was always meant to be. You are becoming whole, and together we will honor it." In the quiet of the desert night, she understood that nothing would ever be the same. She had been transformed, not only by the life growing within her, but by the unwavering love, trust, and desire that had guided her to this moment. She was no longer a woman defined by fear, betrayal, or isolation. She was a mother, a lover, and a partner, fully immersed in a life of intimacy, trust, and purpose. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, she rested her hand on her swelling belly and pressed close to him, feeling the steady warmth of his body. The promise he had whispered months ago, that she would open herself to him again and again, was now realized in every glance, every touch, and every heartbeat. The desert, once harsh and unforgiving, had become a sanctuary, a place where life, love, and desire could grow together, unstoppable and eternal. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of gold and amber beneath the blazing sun. Yet for her, the world had narrowed to the camp, to the warmth of the fire, to the steady presence of the warrior who had become her life. The months had passed in a rhythm of trust, intimacy, and shared labor. Her belly rounded with the promise of their child, a living symbol of the bond they had forged, one born of desire, patience, and unwavering devotion. He stood by her side as they walked through the dunes, his hand brushing hers in quiet affirmation. The bond between them was no longer tentative. It was solid, unbreakable, and layered with experiences that had tested and strengthened them. Every challenge, every act of care, every night beneath the stars had forged a love that went beyond passion. It was a partnership, a union of hearts and spirits. The camp was alive with preparation. They were readying the land, ensuring that when their child arrived, nothing would be left to chance. She watched him instruct the younger warriors, tend the fire, and speak to the elders with authority and respect. And yet, even amidst all this responsibility, his gaze frequently found hers lingering, intimate, and full of a promise that no words could capture. One evening, as the desert sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of violet and gold, they sat together near the fire, their bodies close, hands entwined. "Do you remember the first night we shared this desert?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper against the wind. She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I remember fear and wonder," she replied. "I never thought I could feel this safe, this wanted, this alive." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And now you carry our son," he said. "A future we built together. This love, this bond, is not just between us. It will live on through him. And through him our legacy will endure." The words stirred something deep within her. She realized that the life growing inside her was more than flesh and blood. It was hope, continuity, and the culmination of a journey that had begun with fear and resistance and had blossomed into trust and surrender. She traced her hand over her belly, feeling the subtle movements of their child, and a wave of emotion overcame her. Love, pride, desire, and a profound sense of purpose all mingled in her chest. That night, under a sky dotted with stars, they lay together, bodies entwined, souls aligned. Every touch carried reverence, every kiss carried devotion, and every whispered word carried promises of protection, passion, and unending love. She surrendered herself fully, not out of fear, not out of necessity, but out of desire, trust, and a recognition that they had created something sacred together. He whispered against her ear, voice husky and intimate, "You have opened yourself to me again and again, and now our son grows within you. This is more than desire, it is life, it is love, it is us." She shivered, leaning into him, feeling every fiber of her being vibrating with connection. The desert night seemed to hold its breath, the fire crackling like a witness to their union. In that moment she understood the fullness of their journey, from fear to trust, from hesitation to desire, from survival to love, and now to creation. Morning came slowly, bathing the desert in soft, golden light. She rose and stood beside him, hands clasped, eyes meeting in a silent vow. They had traversed the wilderness of emotion, desire, and fear, and emerged not just as lovers, but as partners, equals, and creators of a new life. The legacy of their love was no longer a whispered promise under the stars. It was tangible, pulsing within her and reflected in every glance, every touch, and every shared breath. The desert, once a place of isolation and fear, had become a sanctuary of life, trust, and passion. And in that sanctuary they stood together, ready to face the world, not alone, not as fragments of past pain, but as a united force of love, desire, and enduring legacy. And so beneath the endless sky, their story settled into eternity, a tale of fear transformed into trust, of longing transformed into desire, and of two souls whose love would not only endure but thrive through the life they had created together.